And I think our music in this country would have benefited greatly had our churches had a sense of community in which we could share and learn from each other. Interestingly, when our music became closer was when, I remember years ago, a program called People Get Ready, presented by John Francis. I have a feeling Trevor Phillips was involved as a producer back at that time. I remember being on a panel, a judging panel, around then too. And when we participated in those non-church activities, the churches were brought together in those spaces, but we did not voluntarily bring ourselves together. And in fact, such were the sometimes hostility and competition between churches that you were forbidden to go to another church, even to worship. You know, if you're out of town, you find one of your own church and you go to. The London Community Gospel Choir, I mean, I know Basil Mead well, and Basil tells a story of how much difficulty he had when he established the London Community Gospel Choir, because he drew people from across the various denominations. Now, that sort of sectarianism, that sort of silo existence, also meant that we didn't learn good practices that some people were trying to bring about, or share some of the challenges that we were sensing, feeling, which we now know were common across the board. So, for example, how do you perfect your art? How do you, if you're a musician or a singer, how do you, well, it needs money and time very often. And there was a sense in which churches had a very survivalist mentality, both in relation to the wider world, but also in terms of ministry. And musicians had to buy their own instruments, maintain their own instruments. And if they didn't turn up with it on a Sunday, they would get cussed out of town for not turning up. But when the string on the guitar broke, it wasn't the church's responsibility. You know, if it's your calling, you have to also fund it and resource it. So there were difficulty in terms of developmental issues that would have been better managed had churches had a better, closer relationship, where you know, musicians were struggling to maintain their musical instruments, for example, to afford them or to maintain them. Again, if we were talking across the boundaries, we would know that those challenges were common and could have possibly come together to put pressure on those institutions to recognize that they needed to do something about it.
A gospel TV show was looking for artists to perform. And normally, the music I was telling you about that I played, wrote, sang, the singing itself came later on in the day. It was probably one of the last things, because I like the fact that I could sit back with music and stay in the background, even with backing vocals. I love doing backing vocals and stuff like that. But for me to sing at the time, I was a bit, you know, you're out there, you're at the front of the queue, man, you know. And I always kind of shunned it for a while. But because of what I'd done with the Messengers, it gave me the impetus, you know, to push out as a solo artist. And so I put myself forward. And I would say that even then, I don't think I was a great singer, but the song itself, Can't Give Up, was really what put me out front, you know. So we done that show, Can't Give Up, went down to Southampton, I think it was. And I'd met folks like Nicky Brown, Noel Robinson, Paul Lee. Me and Paul Lee became great friends because of doing People Get Ready, and a few other singers as well.
And I was a member of David Copeland's band, so whenever he was performing, I would perform with him. So what used to happen, I think at the height of things, as I remember, I was part of his band when the Hawkins family came over, and we did the concert at Aberdeen Street, and that was amazing. That was amazing, absolutely amazing. I couldn't believe that the Hawkins, we were actually, we was like a support act to the Hawkins family.
So I started getting a bit of notoriety. People started knowing about me, you know. Who else? Later on, I had people like Peter Daly. In Bethel, Peter Daly and Luke Smith, they were these young guys. Peter was playing for me when he was 14. And Luke Smith from up Manchester way. He was no, Peter played for me when he was 16. I think Luke played with me. At one time, they both played in the same band together for a thing that was known as Greenbelt. We actually didn't make the show because of some transport issue to do with my own church.
We literally had, I would say at the time, I'd say the notable musicians that were from the Midlands at that time. It was part of David's set for Greenbelt. We were all excited to go. We were totally excited to go. We'd heard that all the top music producers from America was coming because they'd heard about David Copeland, and they were coming over to hear him. And in my head, I'm thinking, this is it. We're going to make it. You know, in my head, I'm thinking, this is it for David Copeland. He's going to make it.
Jam and Lewis were at the gig. Sounds of Blackness were there.
We were all excited. I think we all believed in Dave Copeland. We all believed that, you know, this would be it. And what happened was we were all waiting for the van. You know, imagine the one church van that takes everybody to church. We were going down in the church van, and we'd hired it and booked it to go down to Greenbelt. But as I understand the story, somebody asked that they needed to borrow the van before we did. So we agreed. By the time we got the van back to go to Greenbelt, it was late.
I allowed it to happen. We had a van booked and everything, and everything was fine. And then somebody from our church wanted the van, and I said, okay. And then I had to look for other transport. It messed it all up, man.
When we got to Greenbelt and we saw the stage and we saw the mass of people and how fantastic the event was, when we got there, the manager who had arranged for us to come, she was very upset with us because we'd missed our time slot and said, you can't go on. And we couldn't go on. And that was such, I can't explain to you that that disheartened feeling that came. We were so excited, and our one opportunity, and we lost it. We totally lost that opportunity.
The Sam Sharp project was a studio, a community studio in the Broad Street, Wolverhampton, which me and my brother and about 8 others, we put pen to paper and got a grant from Cadbury's Trust of £10,000 that started the Sam Sharp project, and that was in the 80s.
So much used to go on there, loads of stuff, lots of people. I know even after I was no longer in the area and going there, I know a lot of people went, and not just people who were in the church, but lots of other artists that rehearsed there. If I remember right, I think probably Beverly Knight may have rehearsed there. I could be wrong.
I used to work with Beverly Knight at the age of 14. Beverly used to come from school and come to the Sam Sharp project, record his songs with her friends, and then go back home. You know, that's the kind of environment it was.
I know that Maccabee used to rehearse there too, you know, so, and it was a recording studio. It was a project for young people to go and learn to play instruments, mixing, all of those things. And that was my first experience of actually singing in a studio, going there and just actually messing around, just jamming, as it were. So, you know, that also played into the part of getting to doing a bit more than just singing, that also recording, standing in a little box, you know, studio recording room with headphones or cans, as you know, some people call it.
And out of that Sam Sharp, Joseph Ross used to come from school, he was suspended from school at 13, 14, and he was always at Sam Sharp jamming with us. You know, he only lived down the road, so it was just like probably a 10-minute walk to the studio for him. Paul Reid used to come down there, we used to jam, we used to record in the studio. Louis, we used to always to do stuff. So when it comes to rehearsal, and John Jacquard was down there every week. You know, you had Paul, Louis, Jennifer Phillips, Shah White, who now sings for Eric Clapton. All those guys, we was always down there. It was a really good time to be in music, because a lot of things were happening. You know what I mean? Especially in the gospel scene, it was really, really, really growing and bubbling up, and you had groups coming out of Birmingham, Wolverhampton, London, groups up north. You know, the Merry Bells and groups like that were coming out.
We would go and rehearse on a Friday night down at Sam Sharp, down in Wolverhampton, for those guys that know that area, because that was a local spot for a lot of musicians that went to play and rehearse back in Wolverhampton. And we were not only playing covers, but was also writing our own songs. So we would write a song and rehearse it on the Friday night, and we were singing in Nottingham on the Saturday night, the same song. But we could play it anyhow we wanted, because nobody knew what this song was and how it should go. So it was like we had a captive audience, because we were writing songs on a Friday and singing it on a Saturday, and it was so fresh, because whereas a lot of us was getting stuff from America and all the rest of it, he was a little local band that was coming up, and they're being called left, right and centre to come and play at all these different venues.
Around about 2021, I met Louis. I can't remember our first meeting. I met Darren, and then I was introduced to Paul Reid, Rossi, and then all of a sudden I was part of this group called New Life. Jennifer Phillips, Sharon, I can't remember the singer's name, but it was that was phenomenal. That is where I really developed and began to take my music really seriously.
Jennifer had a voice like an angel, to be honest with you, because I don't think she still sings now, for those of you that know Jennifer, but she was inspiring, because it wasn't just, I think, writing the song, it was sang in the spirit. So, and this is where that point where I mentioned where we was playing and doing things which we didn't even know that it was going to go that way on the day when we was doing it live, because we didn't even rehearse it like that. But because the Spirit led us down certain ways, it was like we were playing it and we've gone off on a tangent, and we're thinking, but we didn't know it was going to go there. But you was playing under the anointing. But people just loved it. And there was a song, it was a song that she wrote. I'm not sure if it was Jennifer or Sharon that wrote it, called I Never Realised What It Really Meant to Me. What You Really Meant to Me, sorry. That was a song that it was kind of our theme tune. Don't ask me to sing it, because that wasn't one of my fortes. But if ever you get the opportunity, hopefully I think Jennifer still remembers it, ask her to sing that song to you. It was something else. And realistically, I think that song could probably be recorded now and still would stand strong and still be relevant now. Many songs that they wrote, but it was a blessing. It was a blessing to be a part of it, and I think that kind of got us as that only from the Willing All days was one thing with the choir, but moving over and doing it with a smaller band and with Jennifer and so on, and the guys, it was something that, because I mean, it opened so many doors for us musically, as individuals as well as the band itself. So it was great. It was great just working with her.
Jennifer Phillips, who has an astounding voice. And I'm not sure where people would put her, but obviously I grew up with Jennifer at Mansfield Road in Birmingham, and her voice has just grown and grown and grown and grown. She went on, I'm sure a lot of people remember her for, what's the program she did? X Factor. She did the X Factor. She didn't get through to the final, but she made an impression, and from that, you know, she's just been growing stronger and stronger. So you'll see her now and then all over the place. It is hard to get in touch with her, so if you do see this, Jennifer, please, you know. But you listen to people like that. They were big influences also. And another lady from Mansfield Road as well, a lot of people from Mansfield Road, was Carol Brewster. Married, can't remember her married name, very soul, gospel, jazz vocalist, brilliant tone, brilliant spirit as well. Worked with her a few times.
And interestingly, it is as the secular world started to move in to spot the talent and started to pull people out of not that they were necessarily trying to pull them out, but they were engaging them and paying them, that churches suddenly were beginning to realize that, well, we were losing some of those individuals. And guess what? They were going places and being paid to play the very music that we expect them to provide the music for, to provide practice time, and to turn up and make sure they perform. But we didn't take any account of the cost that they would incur in so doing.
You played in church and you played in Free for Church. You brought your equipment to church and you'd use it for church because that's what it was. But they were always down on musicians.
We did a tour in Germany, and I remember coming back from that. It was about a good month we were there for, because delegation had quite a few hits in Europe, and they were a fair sized band. And we came back, and I remember that, I'll never forget, the choir had a meeting, and the meeting took the sort of tone of, you will not do any more secular music if you're going to play for the choir. And I was like, I don't know if I can promise you that, because I want to do music. I want to do it as a career, and you are obviously not interested in a career in it, so let me do what I'm doing. So that sort of formed the wedge where I was on my way out of it, to be honest with you.
You know, we have musicians going out there, and I'm not going to say that people are earning thousands, but you know, they might earn a couple hundred and they're doing this, and they go to one venue and they might walk away with £500 in their pocket. Yet when they come to church, we expect them to come day in, day out, go to conventions, playing conventions, pay for their own rooms, pay for this, pay for their own food, do this and do that. I remember growing up, man, and when I would go and do a concert, because then all of a sudden building programs were a thing of the past, concerts were the in thing. So you would leave from you'd do a concert in Northampton, shoot off down to London because they're starting later, and you get down there to do a concert. And so the one in Northampton would give you a patty and a ginger beer, kid you not. That's my payment, a patty and a ginger beer. Shoot off down to London. When you get to London and you play and you finish at the end of the night, it's like, boy, you guys are good from the Midlands, yeah, country boy. And then you turn around, they give you a patty, and you're lucky because you get 2 ginger beer. So, you know, how did they expect us to travel? So they must have wanted me to pull the ginger beer and pour it into my petrol tank. You know what I mean? It's really hard. You know what? It's, for lack of a better word, abuse.
The going rate at the time was a ginger beer.
And a patty.
And we went to London one time. We'd hired a van, hired speakers, everything, the lot. We went to London, did the concert, and when we came by, the lady gave us 2 patty and a ginger beer. And she said, you're lucky, get 2.
Not realising you'd had to spend your money to get the equipment.
You're lucky, get 2, mate.
I started to find my way into working professionally, and one of the biggest turning points was meeting Michael, my business partner. Michael was a member of Musical Youth, and they had just had their Pass the Dutchie hit, and things were really massive for them. And I remember meeting Michael. Funnily enough, it was on a session that I was doing, and he heard me play guitar, and he was like, I want you to play some guitar for me. I was like, okay. So ended up playing with Michael on a session, and we hit it off straight away. And he was like, why are you not doing massive session work? I mean, why are you guys? I said, you know what? There's a lot of good musicians in the church that are not recognized because the church has told them they can't play secular music. And it was Michael's first introduction to a church musician. I remember going into it, he had this band that I went to start rehearsing with. And I remember I went in and we started rehearsing, and Michael was like, I can't believe you play guitar like this and I don't know who you are. I said, well, because I just played in church. I said, I'm not extraordinary. There's a lot of great musicians in the church. And he was like, I don't believe this. I can't believe it. I've been struggling for musicians. And I said, do you want to find church guys, man? Because, and at the time, I was probably one of the first guys up here to go outside of church to play something.
One day I was in the studio and I had a phone call, and I says, hello. He says, hi, this is Ronnie Jordan. I says, hi, yeah. John called me, said he was going to give me a call. He says, yeah. He said, I need a bass player for this tour in Japan in 1995, this was. And I says, oh, yeah. He says, I want you to play. I says, no problem. I says, when's the audition? He says, no audition. He says, John spoke highly of you, so I'm just going to bring you straight in. I went, okay. He says, my tour manager will phone you and discuss the fees and all that. I says, no problem. So the tour manager phoned me, discussed the fees. He says, yeah, it'll be £500 for the week, well, for 10 days in Japan. He says, we're doing Tokyo, Nagoya and Osaka. I says, no problem. Hotels paid for, flights paid for, everything's paid for. And you get £500. I says, yeah, great. We got to rehearsals. Rehearsals was for a week. Rehearsed at John Henry's, and like the final day, he said, oh, can I have your invoice before we fly out? I says, yeah, okay. I said, how much was it for again? And he went into the thousands. And I says, well, didn't you say it was £500? He says, yeah, £500 if you wasn't good. He says, we were taking it, you never had an audition, you came straight in, but you know, we heard you were good, but now you've proved that you're good. And he gave me the proper fee. I nearly fainted because I'd never had that much money on a gig before. And from that, I played for Ronnie Jordan for 8 years after that.
And then I started playing with Howard McCreary. I think Josh got me into that again. Howard McCreary is from Los Angeles. He's a songwriter, pianist. And he arranged the vocals on the John Patitucci album. I think the track was called Kingston. That's where Howard did his thing. So Howard came from America, and I started playing for him. We did a lot of UK tours. We did a lot of Ronnie Scott's on Broad Street at the time. His fiancée was Shaka's sister, Tammy. So Shaka had a tour coming up, and I think Tammy convinced Shaka to use Howard's band, which was me, Roger Ennis, Josh, Mike Burnett on sax. And it happened. So Shaka came over, we did a 2-week rehearsal. But Howard at the time, for some unknown reason, didn't quite believe that I could do the job. So he was good friend with Bill Maxwell. So he called Bill Maxwell, and then Bill Maxwell came over during the 2 weeks of our rehearsal. And then he did the Ronnie Scott's gig at the introduction of the tour. So after my 2 weeks of doing rehearsals at Rich Bitch Studio on Bristol Street, Bill came over and I was like, why is Howard doing that? Long story short, they did the performance at Ronnie Scott's. I was there. I was a bit sad. I was saddened at the fact that I wasn't doing it because I'd worked hard for that. Then at the end of the show, Shaka came to me. She goes, "You're going." you're going to Japan. Because she came to the rehearsal and she heard what was going on. And I think she was happy with that. So it turned out that I went to Japan. It was a good 2 weeks. I'm sure it was 2 weeks. Or was it one? No, 2. I think it was a 2-week tour. And I still have the itinerary. I still have my access pass. And I've got photographs.
I just continued working in the session field. It was more word of mouth. So it was like, Ian used to play for Ronnie, he's done this, he's done that, he's done this studio session. At the time I was working with Sony, EMI, with Bev. I was playing on some of Beverly's tracks, Beverly Nights. I was working with Sony, EMI, Warner Brothers, Island Records, and Polydor. So, I'd do studio sessions with them and stuff like that. And then I got onto working with Lawrence Johnson. So I got to do Samantha Mumba, Lighthouse Family, and people like that. So it just continued like that, and I was still doing my gospel.
I began to get the singing bug. Pretty soon, this was a time where groups like Boyz II Men were coming out, and Jodeci, and there was a lot going on in the R&B world at that time. And I loved R&B, I loved music, period, having grown up with music all my life. So I put together a group, and that group was called Living Large. And Living Large transformed me. They were amazing friends of mine, Paul, Mikey, and Dave, great friends, great singers, and we had the time of our life. Traveling this nation, we were working with an MCA recording artist called Gilly G, who was based in the Hockley area, and he had a pretty big deal in the UK with a major label. So we were feeling that we were on the cusp of something great. And we went on tour with rap groups like Naughty by Nature. We did the UK tour with them. We were blessed to be on Gilly's recording album, and we were selling units. And we were thinking our break to the big time is coming any day soon. We were blessed to be able to work with Stark Aiken and Waterman, famous producers for Kylie Minogue, Jason Donovan, and Rick Astley, and many other artists. So we had our taste of the music industry in the UK. And from what we found, there was a great deal of suppression on black artists. Yes, there were artists coming through like Omar and Soul to Soul, but generally, as far as black artists and R&B, it still wasn't getting the same exposure and support that our American peers were getting as well. So we had a very difficult time trying to break through. We were blessed to have a manager at the time that got us before Soul to Soul, Jazzy B. My first song that I ever wrote with my friends was played before Jazzy B, and he loved it so much, he got us into his studio in Camden in London, and we recorded our first song, We Are Brothers, for those who know me, who know the song. And we recorded it with Jazzy B, and that was, for us, another monumental time. We enjoyed our journey and exposure.
So I linked in with this other drummer, and his name is Velroy Bailey. He's from London. And Andrew Smith is the guitarist. And I said to Velroy, because I knew Velroy was doing a number of sessions, and I said to Velroy, I says, I'd really like to do this music thing. And Velroy said, well, if you're serious about it, I can hook you up. So Velroy put my name forward. I got an audition for the London Community Gospel Choir with Basil Mead. I played with them, and I went on tour with them to Sweden. Was it Switzerland? Switzerland or Sweden, one of the two. And Take Six was on the same bill. And I have to say, it was an amazing hotel I stayed in. And back then, I think I was about 20 then. Back then, the hotel I went in, all you had to say was lights, and the lights would come on. That's how advanced it was. So I think it was Sweden. And we played at this big arena, and I played with the London Community Gospel Choir. And that was an amazing experience, working with Basil Mead and the musicians. And, thanks to Velroy. Velroy put me forward for that. Then Velroy said, listen, if you're obviously liking it, sign with B&H Management. So I signed with Simon Harrison, B&H Management, who was a management company. And basically you sign with them, they get you kind of gigs, and you pay them a certain percent and whatever of your earnings and whatever. And basically, that was signing with B&H Management. I was able to play with DeLacy on a hit track, Hideaway. I was able to play with Gabrielle. I was able to play with Jaleesa Anderson, who's Carlene Anderson's sister. I was able to play with Sean Maguire at the Smash Hits Awards. I was able to, from that, I then made links, and then I did some work with the amazing Donny, and Verroy was on bass at that time, because Verroy Bailey is a multi-instrumentalist. And anybody who don't know Verroy, you need to check him out, because he's proficient on drums, he's proficient on bass, he's proficient on keyboards. The only thing I don't know what Verroy can do. I don't know if he can sing, but you know, such a sound guy and down to earth brother. So with his links, we did Donny, and then from Donny, I got the call to do Mark Morrison before his songs came out, and I was privileged to be a part of the tour. We were the opening act for Blackstreet, so it was us, Mark Morrison, and then you had Whitehead Brothers, and then Blackstreet. So we opened up that tour, and that was just amazing. And then from there, I met Teddy Riley, I met Gerald Haywood. You know, so many music, Leonard Brantley, met so many musicians. It was just amazing, and yeah, so it was just it was just such a blast, and I worked with Michelle Gale as well on MTV's Most Wanted. It was just an amazing time, and then I've played for Sean Escoffery, and I've also played for Kevin Little. I've also played for Blue Cantrell. So literally I played and lived the life of a musician.
I was still at home when I was going to college, so at 20, and when I joined that band Bishara, I remember I was going out regularly, but as long as I was back home and I went to church on the Sunday morning, everything was fine, you know what I'm saying? But I remember one time we had went down to London, we did some shows in London, and I stayed over, man, and I didn't come back for a few days. And I remember when I came back and the guys dropped me off, as soon as I was walking up the path, the door opened, and bin bags was just thrown at me, man. Bin bags were thrown at me. And then my mum and it was my mum, you know, not my dad, you know. And she just hold out her hand and said, "Was it your keys?" And I just had to peel off the keys, and that was it. But, you know, the guys, them kind of waited up the road, and they kind of knew what was going to happen, you know what I'm saying? And from that, you know, one of them did have a flat. And I went and went into the flat. And, you know, so 21, living on my own in a flat. So it was kind of like, but you can't believe the nightmares what I had.
Music's been good to me. Music's been good to me. Even now, you know, I'm working with Sean Escoffery, working with the BBC. I've done Songs of Praise with Ken Burton, another great musician. Do a lot of stuff like I did with him. Yeah, working on music with the Commonwealth Games now, for Birmingham Commonwealth Games, working with some African artists. Been to Nigeria, Cameroon, Africa, South Africa. Been around the world. Yeah, so many things.
In the early days when I was playing bass, one of the musicians in Birmingham that really inspired me was Colin Peters. Colin Peters, when he sat behind that bass, he was just not just musical, but disciplined, and the technique and his ability. He just made everything look so simple.
I've got to mention my cousin Colin Peters.
Oh
I'm
my
sorry.
gosh! Yeah.
he's the
He's
best.
got the best bass face out.
Yeah.
Big up.
The
Cops.
best.
He is. He's fantastic.
Absolutely.
You know, you got to come correct when you're working with him.
Oh gosh,
Yeah,
even I was scared.
You got to come correct
tell
when you're
him.
working with him. But no, I
it's
absolutely
brilliant.
loved him.
Brilliant.
Absolutely. And maybe it's because,
Disciplined.
maybe it's because I've seen him completely from his starting out. I remember, I hope he doesn't see this, but I remember when he started so young and the bass was bigger than he was. So he'd be playing along and then every so often you'd have to see him pull up the bass on his lap because it would just slide down and just pull it up. But he was so disciplined and he practiced hard, man. But I still love him and I feel he's one of the people I can hear his sound. I know you're good when I can hear you and I know it's you.
Absolutely.
I love seeing that.
It's good that people recognise you, you know, because it has been hard. It has been long. You know, you play at concerts. I can't tell you the amount of concerts I've played at in church. I can't tell you the amount. The amount of shows, TV shows, you know, stuff that I've done. I really can't tell you. I really couldn't tell you the amount of things that I've done.
Even Colin, I would say Colin, because as much as we didn't even connect as much when we was younger, like the older we got, we connect more. Do you know what I mean? And like I've always known he was like a top rap, but listening to his bass playing from young, always knew that there was something about his playing that's more authentic than a lot of other bass players.
I went to secondary school at Stockland Green. There I spent a lot more time with some of my brethren like Michael Davis. And there I met a great guy who's my lifelong friend now, a guy called Peter Cunningham. Used to call him Jet. A great guitarist. He's the first guy that actually said to me, there's something about you playing, you know, I can see you playing. And funny enough, there's a little guy at the time, he was little to me, Patrick White, came to my school.
The one day Errol says to me, there's this guy that you need to hear play bass. His name's Colin Peters.
And you know, we had little challenges and we had little challenges on bass because the guy could play bass, he was probably better than me. Well, I say that in retrospect. I thought he was a lot better than me. However, he was the one that actually said to me he thought I was very good. And again, I have to big up Patrick White for actually encouraging me. He knew Peter Cunningham very well. So we'd know Peter, we'd know people like Michael Davis, Zeresh Cunningham, and we started a choir. Well, the guys started a choir, which was the Marshall Choir, which was part of the Stockland Green end, you know, Marshall and Stockland Green. You got to understand the logistics about these two schools. There were two schools, they were smack bang next to one another. Literally, you don't even walk, you could literally touch the other school with your hand. If you was in one class, you could literally touch the other school. So within the two schools, they created a choir. Within the choir, there's people like Carol Riley, which is, at the time, her name was Carol, I forgot her name at the time, but she's now Carol Riley. And many others, Mark Lewis was in the choir. We were just playing in school assemblies, doing the school productions. I'd meet guys like Neville Forbes, who was also at school, Pearl Forbes, she's now Gwen Forbes. Sorry, Gwen Madden now, she's Gwen Madden. There's Maureen, there's Norma Forbes, who's now with Annette B. Now, these guys were all at school together, cutting our teeth musically. Remember, we're not even 16 yet. We're not even 16 yet.
My only thing about the musician was literally pull how the church was of me doing kind of secular sessions and things like that. And I think I struggled and I grappled with that.
Again, the church is still saying that, you know, you're not supposed to be out there. You can't be out there doing that. You know what I mean? It's sinful. You shouldn't be doing it. And so for us, it was more, okay, then, well, if you can't be doing that, well, let's move sideways. Let's try and you know, there's always going to be a lot of church events. There's always going to be a lot of things happening inside that. So we can kind of stay in and do that. But one of the issues that you have with doing that is that there's also going to be big events that want you. And as much as the church wants you to be doing stuff and we want to be doing stuff, you know, they're not paying you anything. They're not, you know, it's not a thing that, yes, it's a talent. I didn't realize I could necessarily be paid for it. And I wasn't really even looking at the money either. You know, we were just looking at, actually, you know, I love this. I want to be doing it. And if we can be doing it and be ministering in terms of what we're doing, I'm happy doing that. But then after a while, when people think, well, you can be doing this, you can be earning some money doing this, you know, it sort of becomes that. And there was a few times when, for me particularly, you know, like, I'm a slow learner, so you can see the other musicians, guitarists moving on, and I'm not really moving on at that kind of pace. And for me, there's a few times when I decided, you know what, I'm not going to do this anymore. And the scripture that came to me that got me going, that made me just stay, was scripture about Moses. God said to Moses, what's in your hand? And that's what spoke to me. So I said, well, you know, what's in your hand? You got to use what's in your hand. You know, he had a stick that he was using to, you know, because he's an old guy. And then when he threw his stick down, it turned into something. It turned into a serpent that ate the other serpents that were on the floor and turned back into a stick again. So it just kind of got me thinking at the time that, you know, however I was feeling concerning me not feeling that I had it in me to be someone or to be a good musician, then what was in your hand was something that you probably don't realize.
Church didn't want you to kind of really do that, but actually, you know, I was enjoying it, and the way I know God was covering me, because God covered me, because I did see drug taking, I did see, you know, profound and obscene things and whatever, but the way I look at it, God was in my heart and God was in my life. And he said, yeah, you're just here to do a job. Do that, but you let them do that over there. And I never partaked in it. And actually, I lost a gig because I wouldn't smoke cannabis.
It's a fine line between what we do, because you can also get caught up with the glitz and the glam of what the world is and what music can offer you outside, and forget where you're coming from.
And that was the later time when I decided to walk away from the industry. I was playing for a well-known artist, and we were in the kind of green room, so to speak, before the performance, and there was alcohol and whatever, and so everybody was passing around this cannabis, and then the actual artist passed it to me, and I says, "You're good, bro." I says, "I don't do them things." I says, "I don't do drugs." I says, "You know," I says, "I'm a drummer." I says, "If I do drugs, I can't keep time." And I says, "I don't believe in drugs." And he goes, "What? You're a black man and you don't smoke weed?" And I says, "Yep, that's the truth." I says, "I don't smoke weed." I says, "I'm really sorry to disappoint, but not every black person you meet smokes weed. Actually, some of us don't." And he goes, "Oh, you know, well, we're like a family, man. You know, everybody's just got to partake, you know what I mean? So, you know, just take a hit." And I kind of says, "No, I'm not doing that. Really sorry, mate. I'm not doing that." So the bass player, who I knew from another gig, kind of just pinched me and pulled my clothes and just said, "Yeah, just take a bit of it, man. Just cool, man. You'll be all right." And I says, "Nah," I says, "I ain't going to compromise my principles, mate." I says, "I don't smoke weed." I says, "I've never smoked weed. I don't smoke." I says, "I don't drink alcohol. It's just what I don't do that." So I didn't do it. And the person was meant to be touring after this one-off gig, what we was doing. And then, so we did the gig. It was a miming gig anyway, because it was on TV. We did the gig. Afterwards, got a telephone call on my Mercury mobile 1-to-1 flip Motorola phone. So just need to put that in there, so you can kind of know where the time frame was. So I got a phone call from Simon Harrison, and he said, "Oh, Dave, there's been a change in the lineup. the tour, the 2 weeks tour you were meant to do with that artist, because I'm not going to mention the artist's name. They're saying that they want someone who's going to be more like in the family way, so like a family. And I said to Simon, I said, Simon, that is not a problem. And Simon says, what went down? And I says, Simon, man, I says, they were smoking cannabis. I says, I don't smoke cannabis. And I says, I'm not going to compromise that for anybody. I says, I don't do drugs. I've never done drugs.
But I realised that we had a job to do, so we had to let our light shine, whether or not we're in or out the house. So once you're out and you're doing it, a lot of people you say to us, well, how can you guys remember 24 songs with no script or no dots? But because we've been used to playing music with nothing and from the heart as well, it was standard for us. We could go in and they'll say, look, come and play.
So what happened now is that a lot of the A-listers then wanted that feel in their song. So when they sing it, they wanted that that feel, that, you know, you hear the music, yeah, man, that's a black bit of rock in that. Drums, yeah, you know it's a black bit of rock in it. It's a good thing, but it's also a bad thing, because what happened was they started to approach people in the church, musicians in the church, and because certain things wasn't running straight, which I will come to that, wasn't running right in the church, they would go out as a job and do it. Now, and when you used to turn on the TV and you're looking, yeah man, I know it, oh my God, look, see songs on there, because they're rocking it out and it sounds good, and everybody, you see the Rossi, everybody on there, and it's good. And it's just pure black brothers running the thing. When you look in the band, you might look if you found one white person in there. Now, you look in the band, you're lucky if you see any of our people in there. Why? Because they've taken what we've had, that we've shown them how we play in the church and everything else, and now they don't need us.
A lot of us as musicians became serious. This was going to become our living. Like everybody knows, Ross went on to play for a lot of the pop artists. So did Louis and Darren as well. We all became full-time musicians, or semi-pro. Jennifer moved to London. I think Sharon, one of the singers, I think she got a record contract and began to do other things as well. So yeah, that was where my music career began. Moving forward, tracking forward to 25, when I was about 25, I thought to myself, you know what, I want to do this full time. Even though a lot of the guys were doing music full time on the circuit, I knew in the back of my head that not everybody's going to be able to do music professionally in terms of like playing for the stars. So I thought to myself, I didn't want to be left out. So I went to uni and I did a music degree. And if that opportunity came for me to play for the pop artists or, you know, professional on that level, at least I've got something to fall back on, having a degree. But that never happened. But I think, like talking with you earlier about, everybody has a different journey. Not everybody will play for pop artists or play around the world. Some will become educators, and I became an educator. So I did my music degree, and then I went and did my PGC, became a full-time music teacher. So I was able to bring my journey into my classroom. So when I'm teaching the class, teaching my students, I'm not talking from just a teacher perspective. I'm talking from a black person's perspective in terms of my musical culture. I'm talking from a aspect of struggles that you can encounter in life. So my teaching practice, my way of teaching is about using music as a tool to engage with my audiences, whether verbally or through my instruments, really.
I think if I was to talk to myself, yeah, I think what I would do, I'd say push yourself a lot harder than you did and really go for it.
Okay.
I think I would have pushed myself. Yeah, and probably created more opportunities, not based solely in church.
Really?
Yeah, I think.
Because I was going to say, did you think that you didn't? Because I don't get the impression from you that you didn't give. So there was more.
I think there was more, and I missed out on an opportunity.
Okay.
A guy approached me, not like that. A guy approached me to say that he gave me his card and he said, "I'd love for you to sing," and I never took it up because I was just sweetly saved. So sweetly saved. So I didn't. And sometimes I always look back and think, what would have happened if I had just...
But I think at that time, the environment wasn't necessarily encouraging
No, it wouldn't
of
have,
making music your job in that sense. Yes, you can be a music teacher because you're a teacher. And you just happen to teach music. But in the sense of taking it broader than church.
And make a living off it,
I don't think the environment was ready for that.
So sometimes I think that if we did what we did back then and plunked it into now, put it into now, what we was doing back in those days, my God, I'd be living in Solilong.
Why have I not, with my 100 songs, got more than 10 albums? I can tell you why. Life's journey for me was all about finding myself. I've had brokenness, I've had broken marriages, I've had the single parent stuff, I've had that. I've had the not believing. I thought back in the day when I was doing music, it was where you send your stuff. I'll tell you what, I'll tell you the story. I wrote a song, gosh, you see, time has passed and I've slept since then. Let's call it, which one was it? I'll tell you if I remember, but if I don't remember, it's safe just to say I wrote a song. Sent it to RCA Records because I wanted to be signed up as a singer. They came back to me with a letter, because it was all letter in those days, and they said, "We like your song, we want it for Sunita." I said, "Who is Sunita?" Today we know Sunita as being Simon Cowell's very best friend. And at that time I knew nothing, I had no guidance. I was 18, sent a song to the record company for me to be signed up as a singer, because that's the way we used to do it. And they said, "We want your song, but we don't want you." Had somebody just clapped me in my head and said, "Take that deal," you would probably have known me as a different songwriter today, or my name would have been out there. So I didn't. I wanted somebody to choose me. I didn't realise that I am a singer and a songwriter, that you could separate the two. Yeah, I've written a play since as well. There's so many things when you're in music, the Lord just opens doors for you.
There was I think it was a youth convention, and it was at Aberdeen Street, and I remember it because I remember it like it was yesterday, but it was a long time ago. And they preached about secular music, and it was so... It made me so sad by what they were saying, because they were mentioning artists that I would like. So they were mentioning artists like Luther Vandross and Chaka Khan, but also musicians like Steve Ferrone, Steve Gadd, Dave Weckl, and Chick Corea and stuff like that. And they were basically telling us that music was not of God, and it was evil, and and we shouldn't be listening to that. And actually, that sermon that was preached at that youth convention, I actually went home and broke up my Vesta Williams record, broke it up, threw it in the bin, got rid of all other music. I had a tape cassette of Steve Gadd with a group what he used to play with, and it was a group called Stuff. I smashed it up and I threw it in the bin because, as Roger said, I didn't realise that, but looking back on it now, it was spiritual manipulation, and I felt guilty and wanted to rid myself of all that music. But then when I spoke to my friend, and that was another guy, another drummer from back in the day, grew up with a guy called Ian Horton. And he said, "Yeah, but Dave, you're learning, would they tell you to throw away the school books and learning how to read? You're learning from those drummers. It's not that you're worshipping them." And then I actually kind of looked at it differently, and I kind of said, "You know what? I have to stop living my life for pastors and preachers, because my relationship is about my relationship with God. And that's all that matters."
A lot of what I've done, people could see that I was reasonably serious about what I was doing. I knew what I was doing. I enjoyed what I was doing. And for me, some of the best people that I've known over the years have been in music, regardless of denomination, regardless of, you know, where they came from, where I came from. We just got on with each other, became friends with each other, loved each other.
I'd be on tour, and then sometimes, you know, you're on tour, you can't even get to go to church because your itinerary is that tight. You can't go to church. So as soon as I landed and I put my bags in my house, I'd be on my way. If it was a Sunday, I'd be going to church Sunday morning. I'd probably be the first one in the church, sat down there at the back, and people come in and say, "Brother Ian, I thought you was over here." Says, "I come back this morning, just needed church." And it's always missing, you know. You get to go to certain countries, like in Europe, you can get to go to the churches, but it's not the same as home. And I always miss church. You see, I was one of those kind of bass players. I didn't have to play bass in church to enjoy church. You know, for me, it was listening to the word and getting teaching. I loved that. You know, people nowadays ask me, "Oh, come to my church and play here." I'd rather not. I'd rather sit down and listen to the word, get somebody else to play. Because like, some people treat going to church, playing in church like it's a gig. And to me, it's much more than that. You know, it's worship. You know what I mean? It's bringing, you know what I mean? It's bringing the praise through your playing. You know what I mean? It's ministry. I try to go, gigs are gigs, church is church. I don't think they should mix.
We had to put up with a lot. And I think, you know, it's really sad because one of the greatest keyboard players that we had was Fritz McIntyre, and he could play the something, man. And alongside with other things that was happening, which I don't really think it's my place to say, but there were other personal stuff happening in his life. But anyhow, from a musical point of view, he just had enough. And he went and he joined it with Simply Red. And yeah, you know, he'd done what he needed to do. But we lost a good musician. In fact, we lose musicians that are really talented. We lose them because of the way we treat them.
One of the things that we struggle with within church and performing and so forth, not that we did it to get paid,
yeah.
But when you look at how it occurs outside of church, if you're going to book an artist, they get paid. And within sort of many of the functions growing up within the church, a lot of the stuff we did for free.
Yeah, not
we were paying our own way, paying our petrol there, our own food and so forth. And over time it changed and it has improved. But I think what's very important is when events are done, look after your artists. Look after your artists. Not saying pay them a fortune, but pay them something that makes them feel appreciated. If they're having to come to your function and they're buying their own food and they're paying their own petrol and, you know, if they're paying for tickets to get them, which is a no-no. But the point is, make them feel not so much like celebrities, but celebrate them. Absolutely. And let them feel as though it is an honor for you to have them come. Because what that does, it raises their level of performance and presentation.
And credibility.
And they don't feel taken advantage of.
I'll go a step further. Recognise the artists, because you see front of house, don't you? Mm-hmm. You want to see the work that goes on behind the house.
Right.
Yeah, in terms of your PA, I mean, look at this tonight.
Right,
yeah.
Absolutely.
You know, you're seeing us.
Right.
But you don't know the amount of work that's going on for this whole set, this whole series of interviews and the work that it's going to take to edit and put it all together. Right. Because there'll be people out there whose creative spirit is not front of house. Yeah?
Yeah.
But again, they should be celebrated and rewarded for what they do.
Absolutely.
I said that they need to be supported and recognised for what they do.
You're talking watch. Oh.
I'm sorry.
He's sorry.
Thank you.